Welcome back to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Greg Lehman. Greg is a physiotherapist from Canada. He is someone that is promoting the idea of movement optimism, and we covered that in this podcast. I'm a big believer in that philosophy. I also really appreciate Greg's take on training and exercise and pain and the narratives that we put forth in the rehab space. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think you will too. Check it out. Let me know what you think. And thanks for being here. Here we go. So, Greg, I wanted to start with just like movement optimism. And I know that's kind of a broad topic, and I don't think you're necessarily the originator of movement optimism, but like, what does it mean? Who inspired it? Where did it come from? Give me some of that background, if you would.
Well, I started the term.
Did you really? Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm schooled. I'm glad to hear that. I need to give you more credit then. I apologize.
But I mean, the philosophy was probably around centuries ago. I would actually say I would argue that movement optimism would have been how the profession would have started. It would have been the fundamentals decades ago. So movement optimism is really a reaction to the kinesiopathological model, which sort of views the body as something that needs fixing. That's something that's more frail, that doesn't have a lot of bandwidth, doesn't have a lot of options in how to function. So the best way to view it would be someone calling, like, someone runs or squats and they say, oh, you have a faulty movement pattern, which really just means like your knee caves in to hip adduction, or your knee goes into knee abduction, or classic valgus. And they would say like, oh, that's faulty. We need to fix that. That's why you have pain, or your VMO doesn't fire, or transverse abdominis doesn't fire. So it's really like a negative view of the body. But if you historically, if you look more at physio, it would be about building people up to do the things that they want to do. It really puts the body's ability to adapt as being the primary thing that we do, which is we stress people and we hope that, and if we get the stress right, they adapt in a positive way. So that's what movement optimism is. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
again, I did the term, but it's been around forever. And I would just say, like, 10, 15 years ago, when I was teaching this, it was much more rare. Like, you still have the idea in the profession that people are, their joints got out of place and they need fixing. Yeah.
I mean, I feel awful because I'm like, oh, I love this term, and I thought it came from somewhere else, but you originated, which I appreciate. And like, I also just love the movement away from the kinesiopathological model. And honestly, I like, why do people latch on? And I have like an inkling here, but why do people latch on the fixing mentality so much? Even like going into the medical profession in general, or into medicine in general, was this kind of idea that I was going to fix people. And then you just actually start to work with people and you're like, oh shit, this isn't how it works. Right. So what do you think that stems from?
I mean, it all stems from like good intentions. And then, but I also think some of it is like, people work hard in school, they're smart, they try really hard, and I think people really want to feel like, oh, I know something special that someone doesn't else know. So finding like that flaw or that one cause or driver of pain, people love that. They think like, I think you can see it's the guru mentality. Oh, I found this thing that no one else could find. And there, it's all related to that. I'm going to fix you. Like, I used to be a chiropractor, and I would take active release technique courses, which is whatever, it's fine. It's manual therapy. But the whole idea was, you go and you find some restriction in tissue, or an adhesion within the tissue, or an adhesion between the fascial planes. And it's very much like, if you know how to do it right, you're really a leader and you can find things. Because I remember there was an instructor being like, I was working on this person's psoas to release it for months. And then Leahy came. He's like the originator of ART, which is just poke on something and move it. And he's so good. He found the one restrictions deep in the psoas, right where it inserted on the pedicle of L3. and that's all that person needed. And then they went from so much pain to setting world records or whatever bullshit. So people, I think that's very extreme. And I'm like this too. We like that. You like those stories, right? So
It's
uh,
magic. It's
that's
literally the
why.
shit we
That's
grew
it.
up. It's
It's
like it's magic. It's like,
that's
oh,
it.
and it's throw in a few anatomical words that other people don't know. That was
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
that was what the manual, like the musculoskeletal class in school was like, is like because the professor was so advanced and had so much
Yeah.
extensive experience. Like he would come and poke in the exact same spot that you were on, but he would use like a little bit, he would actually use the terminology of like, this is where we are and this is what I'm feeling. And like
Yeah. It's
everybody's
bullshit.
eyes would light up. And then I'm like, what the
So
hell am
what
I
year was
talking?
that? What year was that?
That was 2016.
Yeah, that's pathetic, right? So here's the thing. Like I went through Cairo school from 99 to 2003. Before that, I did my master's in spine biomechanics. It was on spine manipulation.
Yeah,
And we knew that shit 25 years ago,
I know.
that motion palpation wasn't valid, joints don't go to place, that even if you could palpate asymmetry in bony structures is totally normal. Like the left side will have a different stress strain curve than the right based on an anatomy, like the actual structures of the vertebral segments themselves. So these people doing that in 2016 is just it not only like it's negligent to me at a university of higher learning. Like you're not up to date. And then you're creating this sense of uh, in the people you're teaching, the sense of them like being inadequate. And I take such a huge negative view of that. It's not acceptable anymore, right? We're allowed to have different views, but not in that area.
So
That's
you're fundamentally saying it's like disingenuous. Like
yes,
it's, and
yeah,
honestly, and I would argue it so for me, it sets oh man, I'm gonna sound like an egotistical asshole here, but like I want to help people and I think you help people through knowledge and like helping people understand and then helping them do. And I want to get your take on this because it almost seems like I don't know you and I follow you and like you almost you have a healthy dose of skepticism for like what physios can even do for people,
sure,
right? But I'm at this stage in my life where I have accepted that pain is an inevitability of me being a human that it wants to do shit in life, right? Which is like if you're gonna have pleasure, if you're gonna go hike a mountain, like there's going to be pain associated with that, right? But so much of you kind of go back to the guru mentality, or even how marketing of physio is like, no, if you come work with me, you'll never have pain. You're not going to
yeah,
experience pain, or if you do, you did it wrong. You're doing the stuff wrong.
yeah, it's
And
brutal.
so I mean, it kind of all boils down to like, are you a Ted Lasso fan? Do you know what Ted Lasso is?
No,
Um, if so, it's this sign behind me. It's like he's an American football coach who went to
yeah,
a soccer team, and he puts up this believe sign, and it's like people believe shit. And if you start to, the cool thing about team sports or sports in general is people start to believe in stuff, and that's really cool. But it goes the opposite way too. And like thoughts, beliefs, and expectations have huge impacts on humans. So a little bit of a diatribe there, but I love your sense of justice oriented around this. And it
no,
comes
that's what
from
bothers me.
yeah.
And I'm not saying that professor doesn't help people with manual therapy.
Yeah.
I just want them to be more honest. And that person could just say, like, I mean, again in Cairo, I remember I had an instructor and he was great. And I would say, well, how do you know what side this is for the neck? Which side we're cracking the neck? And he'd be like, we don't. What's good for the left is good for the right. You just light it up. Like having that acknowledging the uncertainty is okay. Not blowing smoke up people's ass, but still saying, oh, I can help a lot of people with this manual therapy. I'm just not going to say all this bullshit around it that makes people feel like shit.
Yeah.
That's where I take it. Same thing with faulty movement patterns. Like Shirley Sermon, I don't agree with the fundamentals there, like the philosophy behind it, that they're having someone move in the right way. But I would totally acknowledge that she's helping a ton of people and they research it. But usually it's just because they found a movement pattern that hurt and said, hey, don't do that. Why don't you move this way for a little bit? And then they give a bunch of exercises around that. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're not helping people. I'm just saying like just look at the mechanisms and question what you're doing here and try to find where the good is and double down on that.
The tricky thing it's always for me is like when it's okay, we've got this faulty, it's kind of the dichotomy, or creating the dichotomy of like good and evil, or bad and good, or right and wrong, where it's like, man, it's really, and it goes back to movement optimism. It's just like, let's just give you the pot, like, and maybe this is just human nature, because humans need like some amount of clarity and some amount of like, hey, this is the next thing to do. And I want to get your take on this too, because the rehab world is just full of protocols, like do this, then this, then this. And I love your take, and maybe I'm getting your take wrong to some extent, but I'm a huge believer in like, hey, the best way to get back into running is to, if you can run for a short amount, like run for a small distance, and that type of thing, right? And maybe I need to actually take
Sure.
your running course. It's on my list. I've got too many damn courses that I want to take, but let's get into that a little bit. Let's get into like rehab and kind of the direct route to things and how that's effective, and ultimately why people avoid it.
So with protocols, like the challenge with every rehab program, you always want to step back a second and you say, what has to, let's say people got better in a rehab program in research. We would want to say, what is it that changed about them, right? What were the things that changed that led to these good results? That's always the holy grail. So if you can figure out what needs to change in this person to get better, then that helps guide your programming there. And that's really the biggest challenge that we have. So with running, like, and it just depends on your model. To me, like rehab is kind of simple with a lot of injuries. You calm things down, right? So you remove aggravating variables and then you build them up. It's really often as simple as that. And then our debate here is like, what is the best way to build someone up? And this is where it becomes a challenge, because sometimes it's just running, and that might be enough of a stimulus. But you could also say, is their body in the right state to tolerate running? So this would be someone who might have REDS, or relative energy deficiency, or something like that. Maybe they're not fueling well. Maybe they're not sleeping well. Maybe they have a shit ton of stress in their life. Or is their programming bad, where they're an endurance coper and they just do way too much, way too soon, and they hammer and they push way into pain and they have to pull back? Or are they an avoidance coper, where it's like you have to almost convince them that stress is good for the body and they need to do more? And then this is anytime you have a philosophy where like running itself, the goal task is what you should be doing for rehab. I always think you need to say, so I just had a podcast with Mersman, with Falk Mersman. He's a
Yeah.
tendon researcher. So
Yeah.
you always want to say, when is the goal task not enough? Is there some attribute that someone needs to build to get better that the goal task doesn't do? So anytime you have a bias like me, which is goal task, doing the things people love, that should be paramount. You always want to say, is that insufficient? And that's where your exercises might come into play here,
Yeah.
right? So if someone has an Achilles tendinopathy, you're like, yeah, running can build them up. It can help them run. But then you think maybe that tendon needs to get stiffer and stronger, or the soleus needs to get stronger. And those are cases where you would have to have specific load on the tendon, greater than 80%, 3 sets of 4 to 6 with a slow tempo or something like that. So you're always wondering, like, when is your bias wrong there? So that's the very fast, the nitty-gritty of rehab.
I mean, your calm things down, build things up. I think I first heard that when I was in PT school, and then I like proposed it. I like proposed it as like, this is the general philosophy, and people are like, no, it's got to be way more complicated than that. But I've overarchingly loved that, because it creates a relatively simple framework that you can give to patients, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And
and
it's plug and play. That's where you can see how our profession can have different people in it.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you can do calming things down, could be done a number of different ways. It could
yeah,
be tape, it could be manual therapy. I don't know, it could be dry needling. It could just, what I would do, be like education and advice and load management. So
yeah,
this is where we have a big tent here. Lots of people get to play in the same sandbox.
yeah, yeah. and I do appreciate you saying, because I have become I've moved away from shitting on stuff that I don't like to do or I don't think is that helpful.
Yeah,
Uh,
good.
but I still I
It's
still get on my
fun.
high horse about like, so my wife's a physio as well, and she dry needles, and
Yeah.
honestly she mostly uses as a diagnostic tool, and that she gets people in the door that she can help with like headaches via, like, she's not a giant believer in that like dry needling is something you should do on a regular basis or anything like that. It's just like, hey, did this modify your symptoms, and then what can we actually do about it? What can you actually do about it? I don't well, I will never take a dry needling course. I will probably never take another taping or scraping or any of those courses, but I do appreciate, and she's helped me with a few things that I've just been a stubborn asshole about. Like I'll have hip pain, and she'll like, let me do something, and she'll like literally poke into an area, and I'm like, it lights up the same sensation, and she's like, yeah, so do this, and it helps. Maybe that's my brain and her brain interacting. I don't know. What is your take on some of those things, like, you now versus you maybe 20 years ago as a clinician, when it comes to like, uh we could get into why people want to do those things. In my brain, I think a lot of physios take that stuff because if it is just your teaching ability that you're trying to sell, it's a lot less sexy than the stuff you do with a cup or
Yeah.
thing, right? So anyway.
I mean, I did take, we don't, in Canada, it's called medical acupuncture. And it was this really expensive $10,000 course out of McMaster back in 2008 that I took. But I had put it off for years because it never resonated with me. But then this is the thing of like feeling left out. I knew clinicians who were friends of mine who were great, and they would go to the Olympics and treat pro athletes and all these things. And I was like, maybe I'm missing something. And then I took it and I did like a little bit for a year or two, but it didn't stick for me, things like that. Like that's where you are. It just doesn't resonate. It doesn't make sense. So with things like that, I think you have to buy into it as well. So like in terms of like my clinical career changing, to be honest, my fundamentals, they all started in my undergrad, 25 plus years ago. Like it was always about building people up. Like I used to work in a seniors exercise program and we were loading the shit out of them, like heavy loads. I worked in a cardiac rehab program. People would just have heart surgery and we were doing high intensity exercise. So I was pretty lucky. I didn't have too many uh, like things to undo. The only manual therapy thing I really got wrong, I never bought into the adhesions, breaking them up, but I thought what manual therapy was doing when you're really aggressive was that it was a stimulus for mechanotransduction. I would do really aggressive pushing on tissue, and I thought that was causing the tissue to get stronger and heal or change in some way. So still same framework, just load the shit out of it, make it adapt. And now this is weird because most people are kind of getting buying into like heavy loading being the godsend for that. Now I'm less aggressive in heavy loading because I'm like pain's way more complicated. It seems like we have all kinds of options and we don't have to load things that heavy. Strength often isn't that important. So if anything, I just challenge my biases more to like realizing that there's lots of ways to do things and I'm recognizing I don't know shit.
I was gonna call you Socrates or Socrates. I don't know how you say it. Socrates. I was gonna call you the Socrates of the physio profession. I don't know if you want to take that title, of because it does kind of seem like
Didn't
we've
they
got.
kill him with hemlock? Didn't they
I
put him
think
in
they put him in a
poison?
cave. I think they put him in a cave and they gave him some hemlock. Yeah,
Yeah,
because he was
yeah.
corrupting the youth. But well, so where I keep going to is, and I had a conversation with a friend who I really like her, and she does a good job, but like she's like she put up something that was like single leg exercises are the goat for like these things, and I'm like, really, can we call them the goat? Like, is there really that much of a difference between, like, you doing some Bulgarian split squats and you doing a back squat, right? Most of it's most of it's what people are comfortable with, their competency, and then their goals, right?
Yeah.
But how I think about so much of um like helping people with pain is just like pain is an experience, like it's experiential. And if I can have other experiences that are good, like when people go on vacation, I don't know if you experience this phenomenon. When people go on vacation, they're like, how'd you feel? I felt great. I was like moving and we had things to do. And then I came back home and my pain came back. And I'm like, to some extent, it's like, because you were in a different environment, you were doing different things, you had different goals, and you were having a different experience than your day-to-day life. Right. But then that also kind of makes me seem like a woo-woo, like psychiatrist type of bullshit, which people, kind of, gaff at. Right. But what are your thoughts on that type of stuff?
So I with the biopsychosocial, I still put the bio foremost, right? I think tissues get sensitive,
Yeah.
right? I think there's nociception, and I think that our psychosocial factors influence that biology and that physiology. And I find that that resonates with people. Like your neck is sore. Yeah, your tissues are sensitive there. There's chemicals going on. Let's find out what's driving that sensitivity. Right. And that's your easiest way to start talking about fear and worry and all of those things. And like so fear and even psychological factors like fear, I bring back to the biology because I would say like fear is going to influence the sensitivity of your nervous system. And you can go into nociception, you can go into what happens at the spinal cord and the brain. But you can also say that's going to influence your movements, right? You might be rigid, you might be avoiding things. If you're not loading your spine or your neck because you're afraid, it's not getting the healthy movement that it needs. So to me, like psychology and social factors, it's not woo-woo. Like you can bring it back to the tissue. It's why I think physios are one of the best professions to address the psychological factors that are important. Because it's not fear and catastrophizing and anxiety on its own. It's those variables related to their health and safety of their tissues.
Yeah.
It comes back to structure and biology. That's why
It's,
it's not about it is psychology, but
yeah,
we're still the best people for it.
it's you saying that, gosh, it's crazy. This is why you talk to other people, because you saying that made it like very clear of what I want my thoughts to be, which is that the tissue matters. Like what it always people always go back to, like, well, you're saying it's in my head. And it's like, no, it's happening, it's happening to you, right? Or you're feeling this thing. And like your physiology is your brain is part of your physiology, right? It is part of
Yeah,
your physical self. And the tissue is still like the number one thing that because if you're feeling it, you're feeling it, right? And there's
yeah,
no question of that. um I think where I'm probably going to change my language around that a little bit too, is like leading with, yeah, if you're feeling it there, that's like there's nothing to invalidate that you're feeling there, but there's all these other factors that we can talk about and modify that are going to help you,
yeah.
navigate that,
Yeah,
right?
let's figure out what's driving why that's so sensitive there. And people get it. Like stomach pain is the best example. When you're stressed and worried and not sleeping well, it shows up in your stomach. That's not just your brain, right?
Yeah,
That's changed the physiology of your stomach,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like people get this stuff.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about that is how we go about managing it, right? Whether that be like some form of lifestyle modification in conjunction with medical treatment versus just doing the medical treatment, right? Or
Mhm.
just doing because I think both have merits. I mean, in 2020, I was depressed as shit. And, whether or not it was that I took SSRIs or that I changed my lifestyle significantly from the things that were making me, well, I was contributing to it. I think that's a big thing that I have to recognize and take responsibility, because my thinking, my actions were contributing. But like also I took a freaking SSRI and I went to therapy because it's like these are the things I can do, right?
Yeah,
And I would be I think that's the ultimate thing that I just want to help people understand. It's like, all right, these are all the things you can do. And usually when we do stuff, we feel good, right? Or when we try, we feel good. So, um, which brings me to, which brings me kind of to like science. Cause it seems like, well, you're a scientist. I mean, I would even classify myself as a scientist. I kind of think everybody should be running experiments and whatnot. But like, what in this, it's 2024. What are the problems with science or people's impression of science? And maybe it's not science, it's like institutionalized science that people have problems with. But what are the things that maybe scare you or you're like combating or trying to think about?
So two things. I think our scientists in our profession, the researchers, uh, I I find that they're not really challenging their hypotheses. They're looking to prove them. It's
Confirmation.
it's really disappointing. You see it in the knee OA world with exercise, right? I love exercise for knee OA or knee pain. It's what I would recommend, but if I'm really honest and I look at the literature, it's not well tested. There's rarely ever a control group. So people will just say that the knee should get stronger, and then they go out and design a research project that never really tests that hypothesis. And then it just gets it's repeated and repeated that this is the right way to do it. So often, like the people who should be the most skeptical are researchers. They're not. They're the biggest cheerleaders for something, and they're not asking the tough questions. And then related to that is like you often hear it takes 17 years for a research finding to get into practice. I actually think physio is the opposite. I think sometimes a research finding comes out, like say the transverse abdominis stuff in the 90s, and it's adopted immediately and way too soon, right? And then it changes how people practice. And we should like a lot of staying up to date on research is just paying attention to new research that tells us we shouldn't be listening to the old research.
Do you think that that comes from the fact that we don't do surgery or we don't prescribe meds, so we're kind of always looking to like do something different?
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That we just like simple fundamentals of like with low back pain, the research says it really doesn't matter what exercise you do. But we don't like that fundamental of just building someone up to do the things that they love, that gardening can be a rehab program for low back pain. Again, it goes back to like, oh, no, no, I have this special skill where I bought an ultrasound transducer for imaging and I train people to activate their transverse abdominis and their multifidus and change it 30 milliseconds. Like that is the shit. Like with where research, we adopt it way too soon without any skepticism, and then it just fucks up our profession where we go down the wrong rabbit hole. So that's my issue with research. And it's all from good intentions because physios are smart. It's hard to get into the school. You pay a lot of money. You want to feel like you're special. And you don't want don't you, people. I don't want to just be a glorified personal trainer. I don't want to
Yeah.
just give deadlifts or something like that.
I want to just give deadlifts.
Yeah.
No, I think getting strong is fun. I think there's a tremendous. So anyway, we don't have to get into my bias.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a
Like
great
doing
option.
like if you said I can get you out of back pain by jumping on the trampoline, I'd be like, sick, let's do it, right? Like, but it's kind of I think the hard part for me in you because you were a biomech. What was your undergrad in? You said your undergrad kind of took you to then
Kinesiology with biomechanics and exercise phys. That was
okay,
the specialty.
and then you went to chiropractic school.
No, then I went and did a master's first
Oh, okay,
in exercise spine biomechanics.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, with Stu McGill, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
A long
and
time ago. So
yeah,
before he was like treating patients, so I didn't have a
okay.
lot of influence there. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, me and John Flagg and Jared kind of talked about the Stu McGill arc, and I don't know Stu McGill. I'm sure he's a kind and compassionate,
He's
caring.
very kind and compassionate person.
It's
Yeah.
just
I
it's
think that's
funny what the meme lords of the internet have done,
yeah.
and people kind of honestly like me who like I kind of look at him like a Terminator guy with pig spines when he's probably a really nice guy and he's probably just trying to help, right? But there's a lot of like I think it's funny because it goes back to kind of how you market yourself as a physio. Like if people were just sending me 50, if I was getting 50 people every month who wanted to work with me and it was just because I was good at helping people, it wouldn't be that big a deal. I'd be like, all right, sweet, I'm trying to do my
Yeah.
best to help you, right? But so much of it is disbelief that pain can get better, right? Like the overarching medical model that in any country really, that like I honestly I shadow, because I wanted to be a physician. I worked in a hospital. I was a personal trainer, and I worked in a hospital as a nursing tech, so I was wiping butts and taking people to the bathroom. And I saw a lot of surgeries, and I saw a lot of things that, like, I would see the same person for a spinal surgery come back like 6 months later or a year later with, and do another level. And I was like, all right, so this is weird. But um and so I just there's so many like, and my next big thing aside from science was just kind of bullshit, right? And I saw really good physician, I saw the good physicians were basically the good salesmen. And I'm not saying that that
Yeah.
skill is bad to have, but they would come in, they would make people feel safe, they would project their confidence that they were going to help, and then they would do the thing. The person would, leave, and either I never saw him again, or if I did see him again, it was the same damn situation a year later or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so much of, like, that's the hard thing, I think, for me as a young clinician, and this is where I wanted to go, because I literally went through an existential thing where I was like, I mean, I paid for school, and I loved the idea of being a PT, and I still do, but it was like, what the hell? Would I have been better off just going and being a car salesman, right? Or making some money, helping people get their car and feel good about that, and then move forward, right? But did you go through an existential thing like that? Are you still going through an existential thing? I'm probably still going through it.
Oh, still, yeah, yeah. It's so that confidence is huge, but you can still have that confidence without being a snake oil salesman,
Yeah,
right? Like, because that to me, that's the whole the way we deal with this murkiness, like of how is not to say nothing works, but to say we have lots of options, right? Like the transverse, I'll go back to the transverse abdominal stuff. The research doesn't say that sucks. It just says it's not superior. So
yeah,
if you did all the training and doing, motor control exercise, all those things, you're still vindicated in doing that to help people, right? But you could also do deadlifts. So this is why you want to go back to, like, what's the principles? What's the common thread of rehab? What's really happening to get this person better? And then we lay that out with the people and we're like, oh, I can help you. These are the things that we have to do, but there's lots of options to do that. What do you want to do with me, right? Or you can double down. And my joke is, if you love kettlebell swings, then everyone's doing kettlebell swings, and you're going to help a ton of people, right? You don't have to change. Maybe there's people that won't work for them, but who cares? They can go see someone else. You're going to help a ton of people by having a kettlebell clinic, right? Like, if that's your thing. So that's how you get around that murkiness. You can still help people even though there's like lots of debates going on here.
yeah. No, I love that. And I
Same with
appreciate,
manual therapy. Like,
yeah,
so what if we don't really know the mechanism? We have pragmatic trials that it helps some people. So double down, be like, yeah, there's a good chance I can really help you. No, I won't help everyone. We can be honest with people, but
yeah,
do you want to give it a try for 6 to 8 weeks?
yeah, yeah. And man,
Don't beat
I think
yourself up.
that's probably the most empowering thing you could say to younger, or even anybody,
Yeah, I
right?
say it to everyone.
I think when I was starting, so I run my own business now, and it's more coaching oriented, and I explicitly say, like, this is it's at your discretion. Like, I really try to not make people be like they're obligated to work with me. Some of my clients are like, I'm literally kind of their life coach, which is what maybe good or bad, but they're also lifting barbells and stuff like that. But it's a weird blend of it. It's been really fun, but I think at the core of it, I just couldn't. I think so. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but and I don't even know if I should say this on a podcast, but, like, I felt like I was like doing insurance fraud like every day in the clinic, because I was just like, it's just, you're bombarded with people, more people than probably is what you should be trying to work with if you want to do a really good job, and then you're having to type the notes, and if you feel like you're doing a bad job on the notes, which for some reason, if you're doing a good job with the patients but you're doing a bad job with the notes, you feel like a shitty PT, which I think is kind of
Yeah.
a fucked up system. But um how much of it is the system? How much of it is the systems that we've created that kind of f's us up as a profession or as professionals?
Well, in private practice, there is an issue with the system because we're compensated better if we see people more often.
Hmm.
That's that's my big issue with the system, right? Like when I would be really busy in the clinic, that would happen, and then 3 weeks later, it could be cut in half. So my income would be cut in half because people got better, and that's all that they needed from me was a few sessions. Whereas other people who would be like, you need to come in 6 times or 12 times over 6 weeks, and everyone got that like that. So the system's huge. So that this will lead to like shitty practice. There's too many physios, maybe not physios yet. There's definitely too many chiros. There's too many people in this space,
Yeah,
like
that's
to give good care. Not to give good care, but like to for it to be a viable, profession.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunately the United States. I mean, there's PT, doctor of physical therapy programs popping up everywhere.
Yeah,
But
I'm sorry if you that's bullshit. They like you're coming out of school with hundreds of thousands in debt. Like
yeah,
that's messed up. That's
it's growing.
no.
It's like a classic. I call it like it's like the Chinese Olympic system. It's like take a shit ton of people and just put them through the meat grinder and see
Yeah.
who comes out on the other side. Because that's what it's gonna be. And there's gonna be tons of people who come out. I mean, I was very fortunate because my schooling was relatively. I went to the University of Iowa, where I'm from Iowa, so I was in state and they did make it relatively affordable, but there's kid
Good.
I had 3 or 4 options to go to school and I almost went to one because it was prestigious.
Yeah.
It would have been 4 times as much.
Who
And I'm
cares?
so glad I didn't, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just a giant disservice. And I also think, I think a lot of people, I don't know, it's hard to tell a 22-year-old kid to just wait for a little while. I mean, I'm 36. I look like I'm 22, but I'm 36 and it's like just wait a little while. Know what you really want to do a little bit more before you jump into something cuz there's a lot of people who they go to PT school and it's like why the hell did I do this? Because
Yeah.
it's not really what I wanted. But um yeah,
Kyro's even worse.
yeah. What yeah, I mean, I almost went to Cairo school because there's a rugby the original Palmer College of
Oh
Cairo
yeah, yeah.
is
That's
not very
right.
far from me and they have a rugby program and they're like, "Do you want to come play rugby here?" And I'm like, "Nah, maybe." Um so I'm glad I don't know. A lot of good things in my life have not happened. Have been from things that have not happened.
Good.
What do you want young or people prospective PTs or not that like this is gonna get like 75 views, Greg. Maybe more. You're a big name in my realm. So, but what do you want young people to know when it comes to or the younger people in our profession, or what are the things that you would
Uh,
guide them on or have them do?
just find your fundamentals, and when you hear people who sound like they're super confident, uh, or like when people say like, you really need to learn this or learn this secret or there's this one way to practice, know that they're full of shit. They're just saying those things to me. This is the problem because I'm in the continuing education world, right? Like training people and that is also a dodgy business as well. Like so much of it is like you the sales pitch is like you don't know anything. Look at all this material that I know that I have all these secrets for you. They don't come out and say it that way, but that's what they're saying. That's what people are feeling like. And so you feel like you don't know stuff and they don't have those answers. They have some answers for sure, but you're going to help a lot of people with the basics of like caring about them, listening to them, calming shit down, building shit back up, finding out what people's goals are, being honest, helping them progress to that with really like often simple but consistent, things. And so you've got the skills. There's no need to take that extra manual therapy course. If you have the basics of like prescribing an exercise, then you can just fine tune that with research. You don't need to take some special strength and conditioning course. That's a big thing in our profession now, making people feel like they don't know shit about exercise and they have to
Yeah.
take some, and that's bullshit too.
I
Drives
I
me
I
nuts.
really the because I've went through so many iterations of that. And now I'm just like, oh shit, just show up for a long, like just show up and try to get a little bit better, like, at what you're doing. Be a little bit more intentional, leave a rep or two in the tank. Like
Yeah.
it's not crazy hard.
No, like, oh, do you know the right rep scheme to build strength? You could do 3 reps or you could do 12.
Yeah.
Uh, close to like how many sets? Whatever, 2 to 10. Like what exercise doesn't a
You're
machine
cutting into
free
my
weight?
business though here, Greg, because this is what I hope people. I think so much of my job though is to be a supportive and kind human. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, and it sounds like a terrible business model, but because I've worked with coaches too, and you know what coaches give me? Clarity. Hey, they ask me
yeah.
questions. They say, "Is this your goal?" Yeah. Okay. This is what I would project as a way to take action towards that goal.
So
Right.
that's totally fine. Like that we can be that confident with our patients. So yesterday I had someone and she's a runner and some hamstring stuff. And I was like, you need to do these heavy calf raises. I think that'll help you. She's like, why? So I'm like, well, you're a runner, and as you age, our calves get weaker and the tendon gets less stiff. So this is how you build that up. And this is just my hypothesis. Do I know that if you absolutely need to do this? No, but I think we can argue for it because it could help your running. It could help with the hamstring stuff. It could help with your mobility and healthy aging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
number one question of humans is, or the number one thing that so I'll go to here is what really helped me with my general anxiety was like accepting death, which um is just the giant uncertainty of our life. And another big piece of pain is the projecting of it that it's happening now. Is it always going to be happening to me? Right. And one of one of my clients who's actually a pretty good friend. I'm like, dude, are you afraid to die? And he's like, yeah, man, I'm freaking super afraid to die. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not certain about this, but I think you should like kind of just accept that a little bit and maybe a lot of things will go well. And he's like, I started actually just kind of when I wake up in the morning, be like, this is going to be a good day because someday I'm going to die. And he's like, I feel better on a regular basis. And I'm like, I don't know if that helped at all, but it was one of those things where humans are so interesting and we're so afraid of uncertainty that when we just kind of, and you use the word reconcile a lot, right? But when we reconcile, or you at least have it in some of your courses, but
yeah,
um,
that's the
when you,
title.
when you reconcile, just the fact that like some of these things we don't know, but that's okay because
Yeah,
this is the cool thing about it is you get to test these hypotheses, right?
yeah.
um and that mentality of everything as an experiment I actually find really fun because if life were certain we'd be bored out of our freaking minds, and that's kind of what scares me about the future is we're just gonna keep making things quote unquote certain and safe, which brings me to my last couple topics. You still got a little time? I don't want to take too much of your time.
Yeah, yeah, I got a bit. Yeah.
Anti-fragility and safetyism are those concepts that you wrestle with a lot, or you have kids, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I don't use those words, but I think I get the idea. That's just building people up. I think stress is a good thing.
Yeah.
It gets us to adapt as long as we're in the right state for it. Yeah. So yeah, that I got no issues with that.
When you say the right state for it, what do you kind of mean? Like, is that
Well,
mindset or is that environment?
Uh, no, again, I'm still pretty physiological here. I get it. So bone stress injuries. Yeah, you want to load the shit out of a bone to build it up. But if it's fractured, you got to wait. That's not the right time.
Yeah.
And you have to have the energy available and all of those things. So like that this it's still like this is why it's training is psychosocial as biopsychosocial as well, right? It's everything interacting. It's the whole human. So yeah, I believe, but because I believe in building people up, but at the same time, there are times where you're like, shit, we need to back off. This is
Yeah.
not the time to do this. Let's not be an idiot.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. So there's always limits on these philosophies. You
Yeah.
gotta anytime you have a like a principle or a fundamental, you want to say, well, when is that wrong, or when do we have to like challenge it a little bit?
I appreciate that. Who are your biggest influences?
I mean, this might surprise people, but like, because it looks like I disagree with, Stu McGill now, but like, back then, I remember his one paper in 1997 was this idea of like load is good. You just got to get the right amount. Like I always felt that he was a movement optimist before, and I remember him like with sitting, like he would say, oh, there's no right way to sit. His old book, like from the early 2000s, would have people slouching and feet on the desk and all of these things. So that was there. So my influences were from the 90s, and then my professors in my undergrad, which is always about like Digby Sale. You don't know these people, but Digby Sale and Duncan McDougall. If you're in the exercise physiology world, you do. Digby Sale is like the godfather of specificity, like training at certain ranges to be strong there.
I'm
So
gonna check him out.
I had some pretty awesome mentors or influences then, which was all about like, yeah, people can adapt, put them in the right state, get the dosage well, and that influenced my whole career. Those simple ideas. I didn't get I caught too much in the faulty movement pattern thing.
What do you do for fun?
Uh, Now I'm playing a lot of slow pitch. I can't. We just moved. I used to do a lot of trampoline, but when we sold our house, they took the trampoline. Don't have space for it, so baseball, slow pitch, whatever you call it.
I
Golf.
like. I mean, I'm glad you're playing. I need to find a slow pitch league. I'm playing soccer and tennis. I enjoy those things. It's good. So
Well, I like the sprinting. Yeah, so I run, but running isn't that fun. But I like the sprinting of slow pitch.
yeah, I like that. Um, no, I think I was gonna ask you like how do you think play should be part of the rehab process? And I generally think that you're probably gonna be like, well, it depends on who we're talking
I
to.
I mean, I wouldn't force it on anyone. I hate that like forced play shit. People don't want to do that. Like that's classic Instagram. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
playing and we're reinventing rehab.
you're crushing me. You're like calling me out here. I feel
Oh
like.
yeah, I didn't know that. Well,
No,
you
I
gotta change.
encourage
Do
play, but
better.
yeah, no,
People
I
want
encourage
to.
play, but like I want it to. I'm not. Don't you don't need to do what I do to play. Like, what do you want to do for play? I
Yeah.
guess like if you love to golf, golfing can be your rehab. It's just how do we figure out how to the dose or whatever that type of stuff, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then sometimes work is good. Doesn't always have to be fun. Like if you're a golfer, you should be doing heavy squats and jump
yeah,
training.
yeah,
And then you just have to, I mean, if your goal is to get better and to hit it farther, then
yeah,
you got to do the work sometimes. It's
yeah.
okay.
No, I like that. No. Is there anything said or asked you or anything that you would find contentious or like where you would challenge me? I know you don't know very much about me and that's okay, but like as
Oh,
somebody who's maybe 10 years into being a physio, what do I need to keep doing to get better or to just help people?
this is I wrote a blog on this. I don't like this stress that people put themselves under to keep up to date. I think is bullshit. I think I mean if you've done the work and you've read a lot through the years, like physio is not going to dramatically change. It shouldn't if you have your fundamentals down, right? So no, don't beat yourself up about. I think keeping up to date is bullshit. It's yeah, like I would really ask people honestly, like if you've been in the field for a while and you've read and you know the fundamentals, really tell me if there's any physio papers that have really changed practice. There's some fine tuning, right? But I don't see it. When I see someone writing a state of the art review, I'm like, bullshit. You could have written this 30 years ago. You just have some little bit of differences. Like, why does someone get injured with running? Do you think we really know any more now than we knew 50 years ago? You think the coaching is dramatically different? So like that's my thing. Don't don't beat yourself up with research. Even though I love research and reading, I just
Yeah.
don't think everyone needs to do that.
Do you think the nature of because a big problem in the physio world right now is just the amount of like ACL injuries and stuff like that. That I mean, it's probably just the most visible problem. Do you think things have changed, or do you think it's just a magnification of like there's more athletes just playing
Right.
sports in general? What
Yeah,
do you?
so research is good to answer those big questions.
Yeah, yeah,
So so I don't know. I don't see a lot of ACLs, and I don't even see a lot in Canada. I don't know anyone that really sees a lot of ACLs.
yeah,
Even when I worked at a sports medicine clinic, there weren't that many, but I know it seems I don't know what's going on in the States. You
I don't
guys
know.
seem to have lots of issues.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, is this? I do think there's, do athletes really love to train? I think some do. I think some just love to play their sport, right? And I think, in my opinion, I don't know if better strength and conditioning is going to prevent sport related injury to the extent that if a player is overly stressed and they're playing a lot and they go to do something on the field and they have an injury, like I don't know if we could prevent that so as much as like an injury. We don't have to talk about this, but like injury prevention versus what that terminology even means. But it's just one of those questions, like I don't know if we're gonna know. I would like to say that, and I think Eric, I am taking an Eric Mayer course right now just because I like Eric. And I think I value his take on a lot of things. But like a lot of the training that we do off the field is to honestly improve physical capacity, but also there's like a psychological confidence that comes when like somebody can squat 200 pounds, right? That maybe helps them navigate stress and that type of thing too. So I don't know, but anyway, that's my rant on it.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to look at the research there. Eric sounds like he's talking about mediators and mechanisms and that stuff. You don't have to get caught up in that. You could say that there's, you know, that there's okay research that these ACL prevention programs, which are very comprehensive strength and conditioning programs, they reduce your risk, they prevent 50 to 70% of injuries. That's cool. I think I have no problem with the word prevention. With people trying to get rid of that word, that makes no sense to me. And Eric's changed on this because we've had debates. You reduce the risk to lead to a prevention of injury. You just don't know whose injury is preventing. It's
Yeah.
like fire prevention, birth prevention, or pregnancy prevention. The Tim Hewitt, when he did this bullshit of challenging the word, it's just dumb. Like it's just a semantic thing. We do prevent injuries, you just don't know who's get prevented.
Yeah.
Injury risk reduction leads to prevention. That's
Yeah.
the whole point of reducing injury risk.
Yeah. I
Sorry.
love it. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate
And
because
and Eric agrees with me on this. He's changed
yeah.
his
Well,
tune.
and that's just the human tendency to get lost in semantics. Because like if you're saying injury prevention, if for just me, well, I
No.
would know. But if we're saying it for 100,000 people, yeah, like that's what we're doing. So, and
Yeah,
I've
and injury risk reduction, you can't say at an individual level either.
yeah,
If
yeah,
you do a strength conditioning program, we can't say your injury risk was reduced. You can only say that the population that was studied was reduced. You can't make any inferences at an individual level.
yeah.
Can't be
No,
done.
I appreciate that. All right, blending art and science. Do you believe in blending art and science, or do you think that's like another kind of bullshit type of terminology?
Sure.
That's something
Like
I
you're not, y- w- we're not going to do anything that's fully proven. You have to make a guess sometimes of what to do. That would be the art. That's
yeah,
fine. It's
yeah,
like working with the individuals and yeah, fine tuning your recipes.
very cool. No, I appreciate that. That was good and concise. And the recipes example is probably my favorite one at this point. Is like, yeah, like I don't know if you know who Angus Bradley. He's an Australian PT, and he's kind of blown up in the social media space. And but I had him on my podcast, and he talked about it's like it's making chicken soup. We can both make good recipes, and you can like your recipe better than mine. But at the end of the day, they're both chicken soup, but preferences and the subjective matters, which is pretty cool to me, or I think it's interesting. So
Yeah. I know people say they don't like recipes. I think that's bullshit. If you looked at their notes, I bet you're going to see a lot of the same interventions. They just don't
yeah,
want to admit it. And
yeah,
every single research program in the exercise world, they're following a recipe.
yeah, yeah,
So if you're evidence-based, if you say you're evidence-based, then you should be promoting recipes. You just fine tune it to the person.
yeah. No.
That's it.
Well, if we didn't have a system, it'd be a chaotic, right? And that's a big piece of it too. So, no, I appreciate you, Greg. Very nice to
Okay.
talk to you. Thanks for
You
being on.
too.
Where do people find you on Instagram and your courses and all that?
Yeah, so my website's greglehman.ca. That's all the info on the courses there, the running and the reconciling biomechanics. Uh, and then Instagram's Greg Lehman, and then Twitter is Greg Lehman. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you very much. Yeah, both just your work so far and your take on things. It's been good for me as a younger clinician, and I hope I'm a movement optimist. I'm trying to be. So I think those are awesome concepts. So appreciate you. Have a good day. Okay.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Peace.